keep your voices down in the library. The reasoning behind this is because people are trying to focus on reading or studying or even going to town. I just made that last part up, but they are trying to focus. You know what? The library at my school was never quiet. I mean, it was sometimes, but it's where they held aftercare for the most part, and it was like the wild ass west most of the time. Well, anyways, I'm sorry I've been gone for so long. This has happened before when I've been on a little hiatus. The record has been about 38 days. And, well, what is today, the 27th? I wouldn't have it uploaded until July 24th. So that would have been about 34 days. But depending on when this is uploaded, may even be longer. What can I say, man? I can't just crap out ideas forcefully. I gotta give it time. And also, I haven't really been in the mood for recording anything lately. I was gonna work on the third episode of Plumber's Sunshine Within, but I don't want to go back and forth like that, really. It will come out, but not immediately. I don't know when, but just eventually. That's a pretty vague answer, but... Well, now that I'm back, let's get started with today's topic for the episode. I've always wondered how many books are in your average library. And guys, just in case you weren't aware, library, not library. Because my berries don't lie. At least they better not. I remember back the good old days when I used to pronounce it library like a bunch of people did when they were young, but anyways. Some libraries have so many freaking books that they don't even have room for all of them. Like, they have these really big-ass shelves that are like 30 or 40 feet tall. Well, I don't know if they're that tall, but they're still pretty huge. And the only way you can get to the books on the top is to have a ladder. Like, how is somebody on the ground even supposed to figure out what's up there? Usually only the librarian is allowed to use the ladder to climb up to get to those higher shelves. So you'll have to ask for their assistance, more than likely. But what if the book you're looking for just isn't up there and you're just wasting the librarian's time? Now yes, I do know that most libraries today have computers where you can look up the book where that's located at, and then the librarian will go and get it for you if it's out of reach. Plus, they're usually pretty much always in alphabetical order. I don't know, where they start and where they end. Is every book in the library in alphabetical order, or is it just that one specific genre? Well, anyways, it's usually arranged some way that you can find it, okay? But just imagine the old days of libraries when you can't look up where your book is. That'd be a pain in my butt. Alright, well, while we're talking bookshelves here, I'd like to state that in those movies and shows, you see that there's a hidden room behind a shelf. The way they're open is by pulling a lever that's disguised as a book. And since the lever is blended in with all the other books, it makes it really hard for your average person to find it. Only really the people that are supposed to know that there's a room behind there are going to know where the lever is. Well, this raises some questions. First of all, are they even a real thing? I learned that at places with people that have a really strong disability, like something called Alzheimer's or whatever that is, basically the way out of the building is through a bookshelf, and just so the people that are not supposed to leave don't figure it out. But if it's like a room that is supposed to be off limits, why not just have a locked door that has a sign that says employees only on it? I don't know, maybe they're just trying to hide the fact that the room exists so nobody will try to break in or something, I don't know. But is the lever that's disguised as a book, is that a solid color, or does it actually have a label on it like a usual book does? What if someone was just looking for good old Joyland by Stephen King and they tried to take off a shelf, but then the whole damn thing just slid open? This sort of thing raises more questions than answers, if you ask me. Well, anyway, now I know why you're all here. You want to know if one library had one book. Of course, there never has been and never will be a library with just one freaking book in it. I mean, I own more damn books than that, and I hardly ever read. But just imagine if this were real for a second, okay? If there was one library, one specific library, that had only one book, how much would that book cost? Think about it, the demand would be huge for it. It can't just be the cost of a regular library book, because then it would be gone and they'd be out of business. Now, I know that the library is for renting books more so than buying them, but it would still cost you something to rent the book, to borrow it. It still costs money to borrow this man-made object that you're not going to keep forever. If a library really only had one book, and somebody rented it, then it would turn it into a zero book library, and then they'd be out of business. So obviously, anybody with a brain that is at least measurable in size is going to know that that's not possible to have a library with just one book. I guess all libraries have to start somewhere, but they wouldn't open the library if it only had one book. That'd have to be like several thousands at least. It would have to be stupid expensive if there was just one book in there. After looking it up, I found out that the average librarian in the United States makes about $27.15 per hour. And librarians don't always have a consistent schedule. But we'll say on average, they work about 9 hours a day. So that must mean that on average, I want you guys to never let go of that term, on average, because it's very important and it's not going to be exact. But on average, they're making $244.35 a day, which I think is a lot. Like, of course, a lot is a figurative term, and I asked my dad how much he makes in a day, but he was like, that's kind of a personal question. So, I don't know. I mean, if you made like $1 trillion a day, that would be a lot to anybody's standards, but I'm sure there are jobs where you get paid more than that, but anyways, we're moving on. Okay, so now we know that they make $244.35 a day. Our next step is to find out how much an average library book costs to rent. Unfortunately, I couldn't really Google that. I tried, but it wasn't easy, because each book varies depending on the genre of book, its age group, and the condition of the book. So it's obviously not going to be the same for every novel, every dictionary, every children's book, whatever. Okay, so I asked my dad for help on this one. And our best bet is to just do a rough estimate, so it's not going to be perfect like I said earlier, but let's just say a library book costs about $15 to rent, on average. I hope you're still holding on to that. So we take the daily amount of money a librarian makes, on average, and divide it by 15. That means that the average library gets roughly 16 customers a day. I have no idea if that's even true. And of course, depending on how populated the surrounding area is, that will determine on how many people come in daily. But if they really do have 16 customers daily, average, then that means they're giving away at least 16 books daily. Some people rent more than one book every time they go to the library. In fact, most people probably rent at least a couple books, like a handful of them, every time they go to the library, so I'm sure somebody has rented just one book before, but the library is probably giving out hundreds of books daily. I mean, it depends, but anyways. So obviously, like I said earlier, they need to make more than just one book to stay alive. But if they did have one book, how much would it cost? Like, it may even cost more than it would cost to rent every single book from your average library. Okay, you know what? Probably not that much. But it would still be a ton. And plus, there's a limit on how many books you can rent every time you go to the library anyway, so yeah. I looked up which library has the most books in the world, and it's the British Library in London, which has a whopping 14 million. It's probably one of those gigantic-ass libraries, if I had to imagine. And yes, I know that the statistics I came up with earlier were only for the United States, but we're going to pretend like it doesn't matter. So if they had one book left, the British Library, that would mean that, and I did the math, and that would mean that it would cost, get ready for this, roughly almost $860,000 for one freaking book. That's how much it would cost to rent the one and only book at that library, or any library at max. If, say, the library with the second most books in the world only had one left, it would cost less than that. So at max, it would cost almost, we're just going to say, $860,000. Which, those expensive-ass TVs cost less than that. The demand would be massive. And it would really be more like a museum than a library, because most people can't afford to have this artifact. Like, if you try to go to your museum and buy one of their artifacts that are on display, would it cost any more than this library book? Like, let's be honest here. Depends on what it is, obviously, but there are probably some artifacts you can take from your museum if you gave them that much money. In the end, this episode was a little silly, but at least you learned something. Alright, well, I'd like to state some news before we end the episode. Kale-Idle-Scope 7, it may be getting canceled. May. I might scrap it and restart it, depending on if I get my laptop this Christmas or not. I wasn't that far in development anyway, so it wouldn't hurt too much to just start over. If it's already 2022 and I finally get my laptop, then I'll just continue building off what I've already started on my iMac. If I get it by Christmas or sooner, then I'll just restart it. Well, dudes, that was this episode. I will see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.